All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. So I would like to go ahead and just start by briefly describing the Purdue Books Initiative, if this might be your first time hearing about our office. So we are here to help authors get from idea to ISBN. With that, we have decided to start a monthly Purdue Publisher webinar series where we bring in different publishers to kind of speak to their publishing process, how you can connect with them, what they're looking for their proposal process, things like that. So if you maybe have a book idea in mind and would like to hear more from either myself, my colleague Billy, or my colleague Christina, you can see our information there on the screen. Otherwise, we do have a questionnaire that we have posted through Qualtrics. It's available on our website and it'll be available in the summary of notes after this webinar is uploaded. Just a few things. Please make sure that your microphone is muted during the webinar. We'd ask that you save your questions until after the presentation. Myself and my colleagues will be monitoring the chat, so you're able to either raise your virtual hand or type it in the chat. And then, like I had just mentioned, we will have this webinar recorded and posted on our website following the event today. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Margaret Cummins and Justin Jeffries, Senior Editorial Directors at Wiley, so that you can hear a little bit more about publishing with Wiley.
All right. Thank you, Shelby. I'll share my screen. We've put together a presentation here for you. So it should be popping up now. So we've titled this webinar partnering with authors to deliver content that makes a difference. And I think that is central to what Wiley does, and the way that Wiley views the author-publisher relationship is not, not sort of that of a vendor or a service provider, but really is a full-on partnership. And that partnership begins with that first conversation that you have with an author, with a Wiley editor, and carries on all the way through the manuscript development process, the production process, and on into publishing and go to market. So it's central to everything we do. It's one of the first sentences you'll see in our contract. The publisher and the author wish to work together to achieve the professional standards and success that they both desire from the work. It is really something that we value and that we think is key to a successful project from the very beginning. Let's see here if I can move forward. So who we are. So I'm Justin Jeffries. I'm a senior editorial director for a number of areas within Wiley, all listed below. Also joined here today by Margaret Cummins, who's a senior editorial director for advanced engineering and advanced math. We represent a significant portion of the areas that Wiley is interested in developing books, but not by any means all of them. And we're really excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about Wiley and our publishing process. So let's start with Wiley, a little bit about Wiley as a company. So it was founded in 1807 when Wiley first opened its doors. Thomas Jefferson was president, and we've been actively publishing ever since. The types of things that Wiley has published has changed over those 2+ centuries, but its sort of commitment to knowledge and information has remained unchanged since our earliest days. Our corporate headquarters are based in Hoboken, New Jersey, but Wiley is a global company by every stretch of the imagination. We've got more than 5,000 colleagues worldwide. We have a presence in more than 22 countries. This means editorial presences, sales presences, technology presences. We do really sort of span the globe in what we do, and that's one of the benefits of working with Wiley. When you work with Wiley, you get that global reach that can have a positive impact on your project, can make sure that it reaches the widest possible audience, and help disseminate that knowledge that will change professions, help educate students, and do all the things that we hope to do with the titles that we publish. Wiley and Purdue have long been partners in publishing. This slide just kind of sort of captures just some of the most recent titles that we've published with Purdue authors being the driving force behind them. I like this slide because it shows a broad range of the sorts of things that Wiley does, whether it be the American Agricultural History Companion, which is often used as an adopted text in a course, to Delman's textbook of veterinary histology used by vets in practice, training veterinary students who are trying to gain that foundational understanding that will help drive their career. Online resources like ELS and eMagRes, which are helping move research forward and being applied into industry, as are some of our titles in the engineering world, like Pearson stress concentration factors and power magnetic devices, which are taking some of the sort of cutting edge technologies that are developing and laying the sort of scientific groundwork for people to understand these technologies and apply them in their day-to-day business. So Wiley, Purdue was one of the first universities when I started at Wiley more than 20 years ago that I visited, and I had a number of really impactful conversations that led to a number of books. None of them are captured here because I didn't want to go quite that far back into our publishing history to capture these. But just to say that Purdue, I was really excited to be asked to speak to this because Purdue holds a special place in my memory of developing as an editor, and I know the quality research and education that happens at Purdue. So with that, let me hand it over to my colleague Margaret. She's going to talk a little bit about Wiley's focus areas and walk you through that first sort of step in the book proposal process.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Justin. I think as Justin has already mentioned, actually on that first slide, Justin, your areas of responsibility combined with mine represent sort of a big portion of what we do here at Wiley, but again, not the only topics and disciplines we cover. Having said that, we thought that we would sort of focus this conversation on areas that align most closely with what's the strengths at Purdue, right? So what we have on our screen here is health, veterinary, engineering, physical sciences, and agriculture as areas of focus. And I think for us, area of focus means where we have, generally, it means that we have a large portfolio where we're continuing to kind of invest in the acquisition and development of content, where we have acquisitions editors who have specialty knowledge within these communities that kind of power up our point of view and our strategy for acquisitions. Those are the areas I think that you see on your screen there that we would love to kind of talk with potential book authors about. Again, not exclusively, not the only areas, but for today, this is our focus. And we can help you, as needed, we can help you navigate the proposal process. We'll get a little bit further into that in the deck today. All right, Justin, could I ask you to take it? Yeah. All right. So in conversation with Shelby, I think, and maybe Christina, we heard that some of a big interest here in a webinar like this is really just understanding, what does this process even look like? How do I go about the process of getting to become a published author? How do I get the knowledge that I have and the insights and transform that into something that winds up being published and having impact globally? And this is a 10-step process. I can't say that this is the only way it happens, but I think this is a really fair representation of how we go from a proposal all the way through to a signed agreement to get to a formalized relationship where we agree that we're going to publish together. And I'll walk you through the steps from 1 to 10, again, knowing that sometimes there are moments that are deviations from this, but generally, the key is actually finding the right editor. That's half the battle, is finding who should I be talking to within a publishing company. And at Wiley, we have, we're in front of you here and you've seen our responsibilities, but both Justin and I have team members around the world who are editorial staff who are acquiring new projects and working directly with authors on those projects. So our editors are going to connect with a potential author. And that initial conversation will be to kind of level set, like, do we have alignment? Is what you're thinking about aligned to what we could reasonably be successful with, right? We're not going to be the publisher for every single every single project, but we will work with you. Our editors will work with you to figure out, is there alignment there? Assuming there is alignment in terms of content coverage, market, et cetera, we would ask for a proposal to be submitted. And we'll cover some of the things that go into a proposal in a moment. But the proposal really describes the full project, talks about the author, And we'll cover the market, the rationale for the project, et cetera. And once we've got that in hand, we go out and our editors will find appropriate peer reviewers to provide feedback in a structured way. In some cases, we do 2, 3 reviews. In other cases, we can do 5, 10 reviews, but those reviews are typically aggregated from the peer reviewers, and we share the editor will evaluate the feedback that we've had, and that the evaluation process is really intended to make sure, are we still aligned? Is this still a project that makes sense for Wiley? Are there improvements that can be made to the project? And so that review, all of that reviewer feedback is processed and sort of analyzed by the editor, who will then position it and send it back to the potential author to suggest, here's some feedback. We'd like to kind of hear what your thoughts are on this feedback. Just because we got feedback doesn't mean it's the right feedback, or that the author needs to make sort of improvements or changes based on that feedback. But it is a process where we really want to kind of wrestle with, what is the feedback? Does it make sense to continue working together here? And if it does, what changes would we want, together as a partnership? What changes do we think are appropriate to kind of align and have greatest impact with what gets published? And there are times when reviewer feedback is pretty light and it's just confirming, like, this is a great idea, you should move forward. If that's the case, we move forward. If it's not the case and we get some really substantive feedback to improve the project, we will go ahead and ask the author to submit a revised proposal that reflects his or her take on kind of incorporating some of the reviewer comments. And then at that point, the acquisitions editor, sometimes called a commissioning editor, will take the project, and they're really an author's representative internally here at Wiley, where they're going to take the project and they're going to put it in the context of Wiley making an investment. As a commercial publisher, we're making an investment, and make the case about the strategic fit of your project with our broader program, and the rationale behind the project, the kind of the response from the reviewers, et cetera. And assuming that conversation goes well with the editorial directors, so Justin, you're reviewing a lot of projects every month, and as am I, and assuming we see all of that alignment, we are in a position where the editor is approved to offer a publishing agreement. So at that point, the publishing agreement, Justin's going to tell you a little bit more about what a publishing agreement kind of its purpose is, but the editor and the author negotiate. Now, oftentimes the negotiation is around things like, what is the due date for the manuscript, right? Like, how long will it take to produce it? How big should the book be, et cetera? Some of those things wind up being part of the conversation, but royalty rates tend to be part of that conversation as well. So there's a bit of a negotiation that happens. We make movement when we can, and then we sign an agreement, and that will formalize the process, right? So we've gotten from, I have an idea, to a signed agreement. Okay. There's plenty of other parts of the process, but let's go back to the beginning and talk about that proposal. So a book proposal, how do you actually get started? We recognize that this is a key moment. When you're putting your proposal together, it really defines the significant amount of work that you'll undertake in the coming months. Yeah, we're not talking about short articles here. We're talking about long form content where folks want to make a difference with their published work. So we recognize that, and our proposal guidelines, and there's a link there, and we'll share a link at the end of this in the chat too. But you'll wind up submitting your proposal to a subject specialist, one of our commissioning editors, and who will work with you. I think the checklist that we provide contains all the really meaty, good information that you need in order to put your proposal together. And Justin, I think on the next slide, we might have a few things. Yeah. So I think in the key questions to ask, we want to know who you are, your affiliation, and your subject matter expertise. We want to understand why you're the subject matter expert to write about this particular topic. And the what. So what is your book about? What is your vision? What makes the book unique in the market? What are your selling points? I think we often see projects where if the opportunity isn't maybe articulated quite enough, I think a lot of our authors have really a vision that really does need to get articulated when we're talking about publishing into a landscape where there's plenty of other books that are published. So this question of what makes your project unique and how do we tease out what we sometimes call that value proposition to say to our customers, global audience, this is what you're looking for, right? This is the work that you need. So getting from sort of maybe a generic description to something that really teases out what are the unique selling points. And I'll throw a few examples out, and Justin, maybe you have a few as well, but do you have a new approach to a particular topic? Are you covering something in a way that in your classroom you've discovered is a real pain point for students to understand, and you want to codify that and bring that kind of approach or explanation to a broader audience, including maybe professionals and researchers and others, right? Are you covering a brand new standard that's come out and that the prior standard is more dated? There are lots of different ways to think about unique value proposition. And Justin, I don't know, did you have anything to add to
Yeah,
examples there?
I think those are pretty spot on. It's typically something that someone has observed a gap, right? Like I want to do this, but I can't because that information isn't readily available. Maybe I can't teach the course I want to teach. Maybe I can't acquire the skill I want to acquire. And so it's really sort of thinking about like an explicit use case for the book that will help a student, professional, a researcher, someone do something that they can't do right now with the books that are out there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. And then I think there's the question of like, why does this book need to be written now? Who are you writing it for, and why now? A really nice articulation of the customers, the researchers, the students, the professionals you want to reach is extremely valuable to us. It really helps us to position a project for greatest impact. And so I think there's also this question of why now, right? What's happening in the marketplace? And sometimes this is where we really benefit from our subject matter experts, right? As authors who are telling us, listen, this technology is going to have a significant impact on a particular discipline or area of practice. And there will be great need for this because in 2 years, this new technology will be embedded in a particular discipline. Those are the kinds of insights that kind of matter to our decision-making process, is to understand there's a real need for something either now or in the near future, right, on that horizon, about areas where there's either fast-moving changes, technology, new investments in R&D, et cetera. But the question of who you're writing for, I think articulating that beyond just sort of maybe talking about students, instructors, and professionals, for instance, or researchers. I think if we can talk, my suggestion is that you really ask yourself, who more specifically are you writing the book for? Because I think in that becomes that use case, Justin, that you were talking about, right? So, and it helps us to position a book for success. And then the how. There's this question of like, how big do you envision a book to be? Images, what's the format that you require to deliver the content? And how long do you need to write it? I will say, I have a little bit of a bias here. We've done a few studies over the years, and what we know is that bigger is not always better for books. And especially when we're thinking about lots of folks who have not as much time on their hands. I think all of us are doing more in shorter periods of time. I see some nodding. And in that scenario, being really crisp and clear about the structure of your content and not doing too much that goes beyond what the core value proposition of the book is makes a difference. So how long is it? Is it 250 pages? Is it 400 pages? And in terms of figures and images, Are you talking about including photographs? Are they illustrations? In many cases, for our the books that I publish, it's about equations and graphs. And so really thinking that through and building out maybe a table of contents that starts to put some weight on chapter by chapter what this project might look like from figures and illustrations can be valuable. And then, of course, how long do you need to write it? Typically, and Justin, we work together closely, but we typically are looking for 12 months or under for development time. I can say that in my engineering space, we see shorter times than that. We see 6, 8, 9, sometimes 12 months for the authoring process. So for the writing process. Justin, you're similar?
It's definitely, it's more variable in the areas that
Okay.
I publish in, but we do target around 10 to 12 months as a standard, and mostly because we want there to be a sense of urgency to the writing, right? If this is a book that could equally sort of publish a year from now versus 3 years from now, how important is the content? So, it's that content that really needs to get out there that we want to publish. And that when we've identified a topic like that, usually there is more of an appetite for someone to sort of make it a stronger focus in getting it out there. So I would say we ballpark around the same timelines.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Justin. Okay. And then once we have a proposal, what are we looking for, right? What are our acquisitions editors? How do they evaluate a potential project? And when we're looking at it, we're thinking, the bullets are here, but is it contributing to advancing knowledge in a particular field? Yeah. Or does it synthesize it, and not just synthesize it, but synthesize it in some useful way that's, again, tied to maybe a particular use case. So not just a literature review, but maybe it's coverage of an emerging technology and it's tied up with case studies that help someone adopt that technology to bring it into practice, for instance, right? That's one example. Is it deriving good arguments from good evidence? Like, are we talking about kind of, solid kind of research and rationale for the project? And are we seeing those good arguments as a result of, well-prepared proposal? And then, of course, there's the question of qualified authors, right? I think everyone on this call, we're talking to Purdue, right? We're not talking to a broader group of the general public. So, but this question about qualified authors, what helps us here is to understand from our authors, what communities are you embedded within? Who is your, what is your kind of what we sometimes call a platform? Meaning, what does your network look like? I can say from an engineering perspective, we publish a lot of books every year with amazing authors on a wide variety of engineering specific topics. In that space, we are looking for authors who can kind of leverage a platform, whether that platform is their community on LinkedIn, or whether that platform is at a conference where they may be speaking. There are a lot of different ways for us to understand what an author's platform might look like and how that can help us to make the published work available to that network, that community. As again, I'll just say again, from the engineering perspective, we work with engineers every single day. But the level of credibility that our authors have within their own network is really valuable, and is something that can help drive success and impact for any published work. So the question about what does that platform look like? And we've mentioned it a couple of times, I think, already, but does it make a unique and valuable contribution, right? What is the unique value proposition of this particular book? And that requires, of course, taking a look at the competitive landscape, which is something that we do as a matter of course when we're looking at a new project. We actually go out and look at various sources to see what's already available. And does it align with an audience? And I guess more importantly, does it align with an audience that Wiley reaches? right? Because we really want to align with areas of focus, which we showed earlier. And then for us, it really matters that it has a global appeal. We periodically do some more regional based publishing, but generally we're looking most everything we publish is available, distributed, and having impact on a global scale. So it's important to us that what we're acquiring is global in coverage. And of course, we want it to be well organized, and that's something that our editors pay good attention to. And then, of course, filling a gap in the literature. So I think that those are generally the things that once we have a proposal in hand, we're evaluating as a very first step.
Yeah. And just to add, because even if a book is rejected by a publisher, it doesn't mean it's not a good book. It doesn't mean that book doesn't have an audience. So much of going through the publishing process is finding that right fit for the author, the work, and the publisher, and the ability to reach the primary markets that book sort of deserves to be read by. So I think those are good points to make, Margaret. But assuming everything goes through the process and we get to a point where the project has been approved, the next step after that is the contract. So the goal of this slide here is to just sort of lay out what the fundamentals of a contract are. A contract is both exciting and it can be overwhelming because it's a legal document. You're making a commitment. But our goal here is to provide a document that we can use as a shared focus of understanding that will help drive the development and the publication of a book. So it formalizes the rights and responsibilities of each party. It clearly lays out who is doing what. The author is writing, the publisher is publishing. We share marketing responsibilities. The author is going to provide original artwork, but maybe the publisher will help seek permissions for content that's been reused, that sort of thing. It varies from project to project in terms of what the responsibilities are for each party, but it is captured here. It establishes a schedule. So this is where we spend time talking with authors about when you expect to deliver, and from contract to contract it will vary from a very broad, we are contracting for you to deliver the whole manuscript on this date, X number of months away, or it can be broken down in a much more granular fashion of saying we want part 1 by this date, part 2 by this subsequent date. But we work with the author to develop a schedule that works for them. We do also understand, of course, that most of our authors, writing is not their full-time job or their primary job. So there is still, even if it's in the agreement, there is an element of flexibility if things unexpectedly come up. That's where the ongoing sort of engagement with Wiley's content teams and your editor will allow you to sort of have an ongoing conversation if the timelines that are originally outlined in the contract need to change for whatever reason. The contract also makes the commitments clear of what we're going to do. If an author says, I'm going to deliver a manuscript of 250 pages or 1,000 pages, and the publisher says, we are going to publish it, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So again, the purpose here is to have this source of information that people can go back to and refer to if the question comes up 6 months after signing a contract or a year after signing a contract. You can go back to that agreement and really know who's doing what. And then, of course, the financial piece of it. Wiley pays their authors typically, as a standard in book publishing. It's a royalty on sales of the book, and those sales are full copy sales. They're if we're able to license the title for translation or for use in other formats, a piece of all of that business comes back to the author in the form of a royalty, and we lay out exactly what we propose to pay, in that agreement. And again, the commitments on a royalty basis are going to vary from project to project, but it is all laid out clearly in the agreement. Margaret, are there any other elements that you feel we might have missed on this, or is this a pretty strong encapsulation to my mind?
No, I think it is. It is. I guess the only thing I would say, and I would suggest to folks on the call is for those of you thinking about authoring, I am a big fan of just ensuring that we have front end alignment, right? Where everybody knows what we are trying to produce, the timeline, the target audience, et cetera. And I think if we're doing that really well, it makes the agreement kind of line up a little bit more cleanly with what we're trying to achieve. And the entire process, if we're aligned on the front end, works really well. If somebody has questions about how big is it supposed to be, or when is it due, or anything like that, I think that's challenging, right? Or who is the market that we're trying to reach? So this idea of front end alignment ties into the agreement, and the front end alignment really starts with the proposal and that conversation that you're having with your acquisitions editor. So it's essential at the front end of the project.
And we do term our back and forth regarding the contract as a negotiation, which can kind of have an adversarial sort of connotation to it. But really, our goal and the goal of any editor that you work with at Wiley is for you as an author to understand the agreement. Your editor can provide context, can help you understand why a certain term might be in there, even if you don't feel like it's directly applicable to the project you're working on. Through hard-earned experience, I think we all agree that like if the terms of the agreement are non-viable and for some reason you sign that, a contract gets signed, it can be a painful process for everybody, and that's not what we want. We want this to be a positive experience, and so we do take a lot of time working with authors who require it to understand the sort of basic features of our agreement, and are always happy to field questions. People will request changes to the contract. Sometimes we can make them, sometimes we can't, but we can always explain why we can or why we can't. And so, that is, I think that's an important piece of this. And hopefully by the time this process is complete and you've signed the agreement, there's that genuine enthusiasm and excitement to get started, but also feeling like you and Wiley are on the same page in terms of what's happening next.
Yeah. Great. All right. So we've got a contract, and so you're preparing your manuscript. And that's your next step, right? We've got a signed contract. You know when your manuscript is due. You know how big it is. And Wiley will support you through the manuscript development process. Internally at Wiley, what we do is the acquisitions editor who has signed the agreement with you will coordinate with someone that we call a managing editor. And the managing editor is assigned to a project, to an author, to shepherd the manuscript from the development phase, or the writing phase, we sometimes call it development, during the writing phase, to get to a complete and final manuscript by the deadline that's articulated. And our managing editors are terrific, and they have a whole arsenal of materials that they provide to our authors to help them at every step of the way. So the guidelines around timeframe, expectations, how to figure out how big is my manuscript. I've written this much. How do I figure out how many pages that would turn into, or how many words will result in how many pages? And we provide guidelines around everything from permissions for third-party material to formats for images, tables, illustrations. And those managing editors will really coordinate with you from what we call a launch call, where we have the initial conversation with you. Again, it's about front-end alignment. The contract is signed, acquisitions editor, the author, and the managing editor get on a call together. Not always possible, but it's our desire to get on a phone call together, a Teams call, and really talk through what is the next 8 months or 12 months going to look like. And do we have alignment on schedule? What questions do we have? How do we support our author in producing the work, and kind of ensuring that maybe the process or the operational aspects don't so much get in the way of you generating quality content, right? We want to support you in not adhering to manuscript guidelines necessarily. We want to support you in driving, in finding ways to advance the work that you're doing, the critical work that you're creating. And our MEs are available, managing editors are available to our authors throughout the process. And having said that, the acquisitions editors remain involved, right? Justin and I have long experience on the editorial side, and both of us, both as editorial directors and with teams of commissioning or acquisitions editors who report into us, our managing editors are doing great work, but our acquisitions editors and Justin and I are actually ultimately responsible for all the projects that we acquire, develop, and publish. And so we take that responsibility seriously, and we are kind of all in and making sure that we're supporting our authors in being successful through the manuscript writing process. We recognize it's not an easy process, and I publish a lot every year. Justin, you do as well. Our authors are, it might sound like hyperbole, but I feel like many of our authors are just heroes for having developed, written, and taken the time to develop and publish, the works that we publish. So we definitely want to support our authors. Okay. So Justin and I talked a little bit about whether we should include this or not, but I thought it should. I think we agreed that it should be included, and I think at Wiley we've been around for what 230 or so years, I think, Justin, at this point, and I think one of the things that helps us to remain relevant and having great impact in the fields in which we choose to publish is that we've really work to keep pace with what's happening in the ecosystem, the publishing ecosystem and the research ecosystem. And what we're seeing, and I think, I don't know if everyone on this call or many of you have been using any of the AI tools that are widely available, or I'm going to guess that many of you, AI is impacting your disciplines in significant ways. And at Wiley, as we continue to kind of change and evolve and keep pace, one of the things that we recently released was guidance around the responsible use of AI for our authors. So I think it started with a study that Wiley did. We call it explanations, and you'll notice the AI in the middle, the capital AI in the middle on the screen for the word explanations. But and it was just a study that validated what I think most of us already know, is just how much use is already happening in the research professional, and even in people's personal lives of these tools. And so we started with the survey, and out of that, we realized that there are a ton of questions that our authors have. And so we got busy putting together some guidelines for to help our authors sort of to educate our authors a bit, to empower our authors, to make sure that if you're already using these tools, how do I use these tools within the context of content development or writing my manuscript? This is in no way suggesting that anyone needs to use AI, but it sort of feels like the elephant in the room. We know folks are using it, and there are some implications to having used it. And so we've given a really good overview. And again, we'll provide a lot of the links in the chat at the end, if I remember. I'll try to remember, Shelby, because the guidelines may be useful if you're curious. You're welcome to click over to links, but. And we cover everything from just getting started to comparing a few of the commonly available tools. But we also talk about copyright implications and some of those other topics that are very relevant to the kind of work that we all do. And so, again, not suggesting that anybody needs to use AI, but definitely just demonstrating, I think, the ways that we're trying to keep pace with the way our authors are working, and the tools that they want to use to enable authors to produce, to focus on their the development of like the content that they are, and the insights and the knowledge that they want to contain, and allowing them to use whatever tools that are ethically and with integrity, useful for your process. Yeah, Justin, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that phrase that appeared on the previous slide, responsible and effective use, right? Like, I think that we know that these tools exist. We know that people are using them. To not have some sort of guidance or guidelines around their use feels like it would be ignoring an obvious factor in content creation today. But to your point, Margaret, I think that I think it bears repeating and repeating is that in no way does Wiley suggest that you have to be using AI to write a book, or that you should be using AI to write a book. But that if you are, let's make sure it's being done in a responsible way that enhances your work rather than replaces it.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So the next stage is, if you've gotten this far, your manuscript is written with or without responsible AI use. You submit it to Wiley, and this is where Wiley begins the process of publishing, the actual publishing of the work. And this starts with a full assessment of all the content elements that are submitted. So a Wiley colleague and vendor will go through each piece of the content to make sure that everything that we expect to be there, that we've talked about all the way back at the proposal throughout the manuscript development process, has actually been delivered. So every figure, every table, every caption, every chapter, every permission. And it's basically just a checklist to make sure that everything that we expect to be there is there. If there are any gaps, Wiley works with the authors to resolve any issues, get any last pieces of content or information that we might need to be able to move forward. But while that is happening, in parallel to that, we get to kick off one of the more exciting elements of the production process, and that's cover design. That's that's going to define the visual signature of your book in the market. And this is an iterative process at Wiley. We seek input from authors on everything from figure image, author order, colors used. And we work with the creative services team in-house at Wiley to create the look of the exterior of the book. And authors once we have a few draft designs available, we share those with the authors and we get their input before making a final decision. Cover design happens early. It happens right at that manuscript delivery stage. It can feel like your book may not be on the market for months, but it's done early by design. To be able to effectively promote a work, we need to have a cover that is signifying it is coming out in the market to third-party resellers like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, brick and mortar bookstores, that sort of thing. To whether people are interacting with the content digitally or in print, that cover is still a key signifier that it is a real book and that it's happening. Once the content has been assessed, the cover has been designed, we move into copy editing. That's of course an iterative process, again, with the authors. This goes back to the whole idea of partnership throughout this process. The manuscript is reviewed for grammar, spelling, usage, clarity, and suggestions are made for improvements. But when those changes could potentially impact the meaning of the work, they're often queried to the authors to comment on, approve, make alternate suggestions. When that process is complete, that's when typesetting begins. And typesetting is when the book starts to look like what it will look like when it's published. We bring in the text, we bring in the images, we bring in the tables, we bring in the captions, and we create a page design for what the book will look like when it's out there in the market. Once that process has been sort of completed, authors are brought back into the conversation again to look through those pages and ensure that everything is sort of appearing as you would expect. No images are upside down or reversed, or the caption to figure 1 is underneath figure 2, that sort of thing. The proofreading stage is really meant to just capture those big elements, those big glaring things, and not really an opportunity to rewrite the book. But if something sort of significantly impacted the field, you might be able to add a few words to address that. But text changes at this point are pretty minimal. After that, we still create indexes for our works because we do still see such demand for content in print. In the digital experience, an index is less of use, but we do create them typically in partnership with the author. Either the author creates them themselves, or we work with a vendor to create them with author input. Once we have all those elements, we've gone through all those stages, the book is ready to go. Is ready to be published, and the first publication that happens is digital publication. We often have the ebook available several weeks before the print, because obviously there's no printing, there's no binding, there's no shipping, that sort of thing that is required on print publication. And then the last piece is the actual physical print book, and that's we'll send copies of those books to our authors so that they can see the final product, share it with their friends on LinkedIn and Instagram and all those places. And that's when we're ready to really kick off our full go-to-market activities. And I'll hand over to Margaret to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So thanks, Justin. When we talk about go-to-market, it's all of the elements, the activities, publisher and author, for driving book sales. And we do have a global reach at Wiley, and I'll describe a few of the ways that we distribute and drive impact and sales. So, as we think about the more traditional book markets, or maybe the more familiar, I should say, the more familiar book markets for books specifically. Obviously, Amazon comes to mind, Barnes & Noble, some of the outlets that Justin was referring to. And those are the retail and what we call retail and wholesale channels. And they are one aspect, an important aspect of what we do. I mean, I don't know about folks on the call, but for me, Amazon is like my discovery catalog. When I want to find out if something's available, I wind up going over to Amazon. Now, whether I buy it or not on Amazon is a different question, but it is a place that's really important. So for books. So we have a close relationship with Amazon, and we were very early with Amazon, very early engaging with them. And Amazon, we have different ways that we bring books to market, including in some specialized stores on Amazon. But we work closely with Amazon to use some of the merchandising opportunities that we have to add extra, what we call sometimes A+ content, which builds out the title landing page for a project. So there are all sorts of ways that Wiley in the retail and wholesale channel is driving and preparing your book for release to make best use of those channels for sales and for discovery. We often talk about discovery. How do our customers discover your project? And Amazon is one of those key areas. And I'll sticking with Amazon in a go-to-market aspect. The author, as that last bit, is a critical aspect. So what does that mean? It means that on Amazon, as an author, you have the opportunity to put an author profile and photo up. We love that. We want you to do that. It demonstrates the kind of credibility that our authors have, and is the kind of joined up go-to-market that really makes a difference. So Wiley takes care of all of the infrastructure, feeding all of the data to all of our accounts. We have an industry standard feed that goes out with all of our data about books, from covers to copy to trim size, page count, pricing, etc. But all of that work all that we do to get the project set up on Amazon can be amplified by our authors making, an author profile, for instance. But that's not the only channel for sales at Wiley. We also sell through something called Wiley Online Library, which is the platform that we use to license products to the institutional market. So think of academic libraries come to mind immediately there. And we make your project available also on Wiley Online Library. And then there are a host of other sales channels that we sell through. Justin mentioned a few of them earlier, but I won't go through all of them at this point, and I'm mindful of time as well. But we do have a robust go-to-market strategy with a global reach. We do have a guide to social media marketing because I think it's an example of where we can empower our authors to support all of the other work that we're doing to make your products available globally and to drive discoverability. Our authors can support that. So in addition to an Amazon profile, if, as for instance, Justin, you were referring to earlier, if you have a LinkedIn profile and you have 1,000 followers or connections, people want to know what you're up to, right? It'll be a great place to kind of promote. And then how do we amplify? Wiley provides really, it's one of my favorite documents that we provide is the guide to book marketing that can help you to kind of be a partner in the go-to-market aspects of our publishing process. Together we are stronger. Okay.
And that brings our presentation to a close. It's been a great opportunity to share a little bit more about Wiley. with you. We obviously welcome any questions. We provide our contact information here. So if you have any questions after the fact, if you just want to, if you have a book idea and it doesn't fall within our discipline areas, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help make contacts for you or connect you to the right person within Wiley to sort of have a conversation. But yeah, we'll hand it back over to you, Shelby, now.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very insightful. As I haven't seen anybody raise their hand or type anything in the chat, I did have one question myself that popped up. So when we are talking about, you say, you expect anywhere between 6 to 12 months for content development from the authors. So that's kind of their writing. Once they hand over the manuscript, what would you say your average time with all of that you listed would be to then get to production?
Yeah. It's a fair question. I'm going to say, and then I'm going to let Justin jump in too, because I would say anywhere from 7 to 9 months is fairly typical, maybe edging into the 8 to 9 months, maybe more broadly across the full portfolio, Justin.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess you're going to say, Justin, that there are some areas that necessarily take a bit longer than that, depending on format and such. So Justin, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. It is so variable on the type of product, a product that has 200 full color figures versus one that has 5, that's going to impact the production timeline, the sensitivity of the images, whether you're doing like a hematological stain versus, a black and white line graph. It's just, those are the sorts of things that will influence the complexity in the timeline. I will say Wiley is aggressively trying to reduce our publishing timelines. I mean, I think we understand that the demand for this content to be available is shorter and shorter, and we're making big steps and big efforts to make that more of a reality.
So thank you very much. Bilal, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Hi, thank you very much for this nice presentation. I actually have 2 questions. One is about the review process with Wiley, and one is about the usage of AI. So when we submit the proposal, like individual editors or a group of editors, how long does it take generally to review that book proposal and return the comments? Versus if a university or some support team from the university submits that proposal on behalf of the editorial team, what's the difference between that timeline, individual versus with the university? And my second question is about AI. So how does Wiley check the usage of AI? Do you run the chapters through an AI scanner or something like that? Because there's a lot of usage. You can just tell by just reading a paragraph or a page that it's been written with AI or there is human interference or not. Thank you very much.
Well, why don't I jump in with answer to the timeline question? The review timeline, we strive to make it as streamlined as possible. Ideally, we would like to have feedback to you and for an initial review within a couple of weeks. Depending on the time of year, can vary because of reviewer availability and that sort of thing. But throughout that process, you'll be kept up to date by your acquisitions editor. I would say because we seek input from the market, from the potential users of the book, regardless of where it comes from, the timelines probably don't change significantly, depending on whether it be an entity that would be supporting the book or whether it be an editor team.
Okay. And then I can take the second question, Bilal, around AI, and are we using any AI detection tools to review manuscripts? Wiley publishes journals as well, and I'll just preface this by saying in our journal space we do have a whole system that we use. It's called Wiley Research Exchange, and some of the tools that are embedded in that platform are really assessing for AI and some other things. It's like 6 or 7 factors taken all together and then kind of weighted and ranked to figure out, do we have any integrity issues? As it relates to our long form books, I've been, and I think Justin, you've been involved in a number of efforts to sort of to use some detection tools from a variety of different external vendors from Wiley. Here's what I'll say. This is where we've landed. We have landed with the idea that we will empower our authors to understand how to ethically use AI tools. And we will do what we call a similarity check. And that similarity check will start to hint at some things that might be either if it's, sometimes it's the use of an author's own work that we just want to make sure we're not using too much of a previously published work in a new work that we're kind of publishing. And sometimes it's a question of in that similarity check, there's some other things that will pop up, but we're not specifically assessing for AI detection. However, I will say that I'm going to go back to our proposal process. Our proposal process, we look at a lot of proposals every year. I can now tell, I think, Bilal, you were kind of saying the same thing. I can tell when someone has used AI to an extent that it doesn't feel like it's the author representing their concept or their idea. And we'll query a potential author on that. But we are not, and so front end alignment, having those conversations up front about are we not, and are we using it in the right way? Are you retaining your author voice? The knowledge and insights that you want to share are questions, then a conversation that we can have on the front end, so we don't wind up getting to the point where we're using detection tools in a fast moving space. So Bilal, did that answer your question?
Yes. I just have a follow-up question. So, like the similarity index detection or plagiarism detection in text, you scan or you kind of detect it for the AI content, but there is no kind of a score thing that, okay, this much is similarity. For example, if we go for like authenticate or Turnitin, okay, it should be less than 20% similarity or less than 15%, but there is no scoring for the AI based context. It may hint to you that, okay, there is some AI. I suspect that there is some AI tools involved in this text or in this chapter or in this bunch of chapters, but there is no scoring metrics or something like that. This is my last question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. If I understand it correctly, yeah, we use Authenticate for our similarity checks, but we don't have the AI piece enabled, and that's one of the tools that we've looked at for our long form content, and have not made the decision that we should be using that. And I think there are so many questions. We've had a robust discussion about this internally, but there are a lot of questions about what does it mean, what tool was used, has it changed? What was generated? There are a lot of, and in a fast moving space, I think it's really challenging for us. We've made that decision that at the moment, we are not using sort of AI detection tools. Yeah, Justin, did you want to weigh in?
The only thing I was going to add to that is that we didn't touch on it, but one component of our contract is also an AI disclosure commitment, and so that is, if you are using AI, that you alert us to it, and you sort of tell us the AI tools you've used and give us a little bit of context into the sort of use case you've applied to using AI in your work. Whether that be helping sort of identify potential sources, whether it be whatever, cleaning up language usage or things like that. So there is an element where we do ask authors to be upfront with us about that, and that is an important piece to our assessment as well.
Yeah, and Bilal, I'm going to drop the links in, and if you're interested, you can follow the link to see our AI guidelines. You might be interested in at least just perusing them. So I'll post that now.
Sure. Thanks
there you
very
go.
much.
All right. Well, thank you again very much, Justin and Margaret, for your time today. If you all have any questions or maybe think of something immediately following this webinar, please feel free to reach out to myself, my colleague Billy, or Christina on the call as well. And we can kind of field your questions or direct you then to Margaret and Justin. But thank you guys so much for your time, and we will see all of you Purdue folks on the next webinar.
Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.